Okay, so another film buff special, which is Roma, directed by Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah.
Great name. The director of Gravity. He was also the director of one of the Harry Potter films, I believe.
Okay.
And he also directed Children of Men, and he directed Y Tu Mama Tambien, which I remember seeing years ago.
Yes,
in
I do.
2001. So Roma, a real passion project for him, a sort of retelling of his childhood, but not through the subjective eyes of him as a boy.
No.
Through the eyes primarily of his, what would you call her, childminder, carer,
Yeah,
maid?
he was there, the director. He just gave us a short talk before, and he kept calling them the two women who brought him up. That turned out to be his mother, and I suppose you could say the maid or the nanny.
And this film's being really sort of talked about a lot. It's Mexico's submission for the Best Foreign Picture Award, and it won the Golden Lion, I think, at Venice.
It
so
did.
I think it's, a lot of people are very excited about it.
It's black and white, which
black and white, and it's shot, directed, co-written, produced, and co-edited by Alfonso Cuarón. So it's it's a labour of love, and it really is a sort of tone poem to Mexico City.
Yes.
And a tone poem to clearly two very important women in his life.
Well, I had no idea on this one what I was going to be looking at all, and he gave his little speech, and I thought, well, that's fine, the two women that brought him up. And then we're sort of immediately taken into the household in a sort of reasonably affluent Mexican.
They're both doctors or something, aren't they?
Yeah.
Was a biochemist.
Two middle class parents. And the number of servants, of which there are about 3, they all seem to be indigenous Mexican girls. Basically, the whole film was about the relationship between the father and the mother of these children, and I don't like to use the word maid, but what would I say, nanny, sort of
nanny,
almost thing, of the woman who brought up the kids. Now, the kids adored this nanny.
Yeah.
And not just the one boy who we presume is Cuarón as the child,
director,
but all of them. We sort of discover fairly soon that the marriage is in trouble.
Yes.
That the maid is sort of.
Well, she gets herself into trouble.
Well, the maid's in trouble too, isn't she? Yeah.
We won't talk about what happens in Claire's life, because that is such a fundamental spoiler.
Yes.
I would say pay attention at a particular scene where she's in a cinema on a date looking at a film, because one thing about this film is it is edited by Cuarón himself, but there's literally not a single montage of sorts. It's a lot of very languorous, lingering shots, which are all of it. I mean, there's not one shot that isn't beautiful.
No, they're all gorgeous.
But I missed a majorly important narrative moment, which was shared in the cinema. So pay attention in the cinema, for God's sake. How did you feel about the black and white? Do you think he's chosen black and white simply because it's nostalgic?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, part of his sort of idea was to show Mexico City in all its variations and all its colour, as you said.
Well, it was Nadia.
And then it wasn't. There was no colour, so in that sense. But I didn't feel disappointed by that. I still felt the same sort of madness, because it's a mad sort of life and city, and it took you onto the street, and dogs play a very important role in this film.
Dog shit plays a majorly important role in this film.
But dogs are everywhere, aren't they?
Aren't they? It was Nadia. When we saw the trailer, Nadia said, "I don't understand. Why would you want to make Mexico black and white? It's so full of colour." And my suggestion at that time was, well, we're very used to seeing Mexico in all its colours. Maybe that, in a sense, the slightly hackneyed, cliched way of showing Mexico is to show the acute colours and the
maybe
do you know what I mean?
Because when he took you down the streets and you saw all the people selling everything you can imagine and blowing on whistles and carrying chickens, and you going past all these billboards, I mean, you really got the idea of teeming with life without the colour. And so maybe you thought, for change, I'll do it this way. It certainly worked for me.
Because I was slightly concerned watching it, would this have ever got made if this didn't happen to be the director of Gravity? Is this a sort of, not a vanity project? The thing that stops it from being a vanity project is that it's not principally about the boy that is Cuarón, if you like. It is about these two women, and in that regard, it's a fascinating portrait of in a certain era, what the choices are for women. As well.
And they do touch on the reason I keep using the phrase indigenous people is because travelling around South America, and this is what happens.
That's interesting.
And so indigenous Mexican people who are poor have to work in the houses of they call them gringos, you know. And we're given sort of little accesses into those. There's a scene where they go out shooting with some really quite revolting people.
Yes.
And you get an idea of the kindness of these girls.
Yeah.
And they're not just doing it because they're paid at all. You can see that the kids love them.
They're
love
devoted to the kids, aren't they?
They are devoted.
It's one of those films that's percolated through me a lot more after the event. This is why I quite like not doing the reviews straight after you come out, because you can be a little bit brutal going to see these films. And I just thought that was, her character has really stuck with me, a sort of stoicism to her, a sort of, a steely resolve. And yet at the same time, that steeliness and that stoicism doesn't make her just hard and brittle.
No.
She could be as compassionate as she could be with those children that weren't even her children.
Yeah.
Some lovely little flourishes, I thought, in there. I was thinking specifically of Cleo's boyfriend at one point when he demonstrates his sort of stick action. It sounds rude, but I mean, he does demonstrate.
Kendo or his whatever, Tai Chi or Taekwondo or something.
Yeah, you can see more than one stick in the shot. You'll know what we mean when we say that. But I thought that was very sweet. It was really stuck with me. Very sweet. The director said before it started, he said, this is a film about memory and the channels and the avenues and the corridors of memory. And he said that as he went down one corridor, another corridor would open. And if I think back to this film, it's a little bit like that. It's almost like looking through one of those. Do you remember those strange sort of kaleidoscope? That's it. It was kaleidoscopic, not in terms of the visuals, but kaleidoscopic insofar as it would fragment to another sort of element of an experience or a memory or an experience and a memory. The way he introduced his father through a series of close-up shots of him repeatedly just getting the car driven into a narrow space where he'd drive in, just nudge the side mirrors so that they were closed in a bit, reverse, and then come back in. And then there was the close-up of the key and the close-up of and it reminded me of my granddad, those details you pick up as a boy.
Yes.
I thought they were beautifully observed.
They were.
I couldn't help but feel I was just missing not having grown up in Mexico, not having, if this had been set in London in the 70s, I'd have been, I'd have been relating to it all. So I had a slight sort of disconnect. I did feel it was too long.
Yeah.
I felt the film was it's 2 hours, 15 minutes. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was an indulgent film, because I've had long enough it's stuck with me, images have stuck with me. But you do have to sort of bed in for the fact that it's long.
I thought it was stunning, and I just find it fascinating. I suppose if I'm rigorous, it maybe was a bit too long.
Yeah.
But I wasn't bored for a second, and I went with the whole length of it. He gave you these long sort of slow shots, like there's a scene where they're all on the beach, and you really feel they're on the beach, and she's looking after the kids and all of this. And then you get these sort of short vignettes, like the boyfriend and the man and the father coming back, and the dogs, and can't forget the dogs. And I just thought it was I thought it was beautifully done, and teeming in the background, the whole of Mexico City. Like every time they go into the streets, there's always a band coming down the road, and there's always sort of which people that have been to South America will know that that's always happening. And
whatever happened to dogs?
Really good.
Dog shit in the 70s was a big thing everywhere. Because I remember dog shit in the 70s everywhere. I also like the way in which the politics sort of just crashed in. You felt very much you were at street level with both families. So we didn't have the politics of what was going on when the riots were happening. I didn't understand the history.
No.
And yet you didn't really need to kind of feel the fear and feel the anxiety.
Yeah.
But feeling it from both the maid Cleo's perspective and also from the sort of the rich family's perspective as well.
Yeah. There was one scene, for example, where an earthquake started to happen, and she was actually in a hospital at that stage. And it took me right back to being South America, where the joke became, there's an earthquake every other day.
Yes.
Because you get these minor earthquakes, and that's exactly how it was treated. But at the same time, because we do live in London, because we do live in the West, and that doesn't happen, you sort of instantly feel...
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to that scene, that very poetic, beautiful shot, which you realise has a lot of symbolism in it, of a baby in a life support system with all the rocks on top of it.
All the rocks on top of it,
I thought, some very...
And just sort of the whole sort of, not meaningless of life, but that life is cheap somehow for certain people.
Yes.
And the scenes where they are sort of having to go to hospital for whatever reasons, that it's a different story for some people and others.
In a weird way, you also felt it for the rich family when the father's gone back and removed all the bookcases.
Yes.
You get that similar sense of, but there's that similar sense of that's an earthquake of sorts that's happened to that family.
That's very true.
And it sort of reminds me of that J.G. Ballard comment that we are all living in a set dressing. Everything is set dressing, and it can be removed within a snapshot. So I would say that the earthquake scene in it is a massive metaphor for what the film's about. It's almost a film about the tremors of life, isn't it? The tremors that affect all families, regardless of class.
Yeah.
Oh, the more we talk about it, the more I like it. The more we talk about it, the more I want to see it.
No, I really liked it a lot.
Okay, so in summary, what would you say and what would your score be? And should it win the Oscar?
I really, really enjoyed it. And you might not know this, but I went to South America. And so I just so many things sort of resonated with me, and I just liked the way he did it. I like the languorousness of it. I like the fact that it took a long time. I like the fact that I thought the kids were terribly well done, and I love the growing relationship between the two women, which there really was.
Yeah.
And I would actually give it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah. Okay. It's worked a quiet charm on me,
good.
and I think it's a lot of the images have stayed with me. I keep thinking of Cleo's face.
I know.
She has to contend with two remarkably traumatic things in this film, and although I had the dislocation of not being able to relate to it because it was Mexican, etc., it's almost like every single shot of every scene was a massive metaphor for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
You could encapsulate the whole film in every single shot somehow. Her going out to sea, the rockiness of it all, her being critical to and all that.
And I love the way that you kept going backwards and forwards, like with no sort of rush.
No rush.
Although the situation was sort of, could have been dicey, but I just really liked the way he did that.
But my only word of caution would be it is long, and I was a little bit restless, and I can watch long, slow films. I would give it. Oh, and we have to make a comment about some lovely little moments where you can see where the seed of the idea for gravity obviously came from.
Oh yes.
A couple of shots of this young boy in a sort of astronaut's outfit. I thought that was quite cute. Yeah. So I'd probably give this an 8 out of 10.
Oh, good.
Yeah. No, it's really worked its charm overnight on me actually. So
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.